So who has ever done something incredibly dumb in their life? Raise your hands. All right, basically everyone. Now keep your hands in the air if you've ever thought afterwards, I really shouldn't do that again. All right, basically everyone again. You can put your hands down. So this is something that I call a note to self. Basically a note to self is something that is part of something bigger, rules to life. Now, before I get into what these rules to life are, what they mean, how they work and everything, I need to give you a backstory. So, who's ever seen the TV show NCIS? Raise your hands. All right, pretty much everyone. For those of you that haven't, one of the main characters in the TV show, his name is Leroy Jethro Gibbs. Now, Gibbs has created rules like I have. And as a matter of fact, these rules are dedicated to the episodes. You see them all the time. One of the episodes is actually called Rule 51, where you see the creation of Rule 51, but also like 3 or 4 other rules are mentioned in it. So one day I was sitting back home in Illinois, and I thought to myself, what happens if I make my own list of rules? Seems like something cool to do. Like Gibbs is a law enforcement officer. That's what I want to do when I grow up. So I did that. I made my own list of rules. I took some ideas from Gibbs, and some of the ideas were investigative techniques, the special things, and some of them were just more fun ones that I created myself. One of those ones I created was originally Rule 13. Now it's Rule 16, and that is never fall or lean to a side. Compromise. So basically, if you ever see an argument happening and you want to help those people out, go over, don't take a side, just help them find something that's beneficial to both of them. Now, in 2013, I was on a Boy Scout camp staff called National Youth Leadership Training, called NYLT. So at NYLT, the lead youth that year, his name was John. Now, John had actually created his own list of rules like I had. When I found that out, him and I put our heads together, found the commonalities, found the differences, and at the end of the day, John had 28 rules and I had 36. So here we see selection of Rule 16 through 24. There's a blank spot on mine because John actually had a 19.5 at the time, and since then our rules have changed some. So the following year, I was deemed the head lead youth for this camp. I had a big job. John couldn't make it back because he had college, he had some other things he had to take care of. Now, not only that, I was also the area director for a program area across the street at another Boy Scout camp called Buckskin. Now, Buckskin, it was something new to me. It wasn't there when I had been a camper there years before. So on the left side of the screen, we see a thing called the black hole. Basically, they took 2 60 or 70-foot corrugated tubes, put them on the side of a hill, and you slid down them on an old plastic sled. And the other one was tomahawk throwing. Now, I knew some stuff about tomahawk throwing, but I knew not much about the black hole. So between these 2 camps, I learned that year that life has more rules to follow than what I already had figured out. More, I guess you'd say, serious rules. So with that, one of the rules I came up with that year was Rule 8, figure it out. Now, I don't mean figure out what the rule is. That's what the actual rule is. It's not like who's on first. Only a few of you got that. That's all right. So I had to figure out how to run my program area that year. I didn't have much to go on from the previous area director, but I had some information from my supervisors, which worked for me. But like I said, I had to figure things out. If something went wrong, whether it was just an easy time change, what do I do for the next 15 minutes? Or how do I take this 15 minutes that I now lost and add that back in? Or something more serious, like maybe someone getting hurt. Currently, 55 rules exist. This is my own list of rules. Some of them are more lighthearted, and on the more serious side of the spectrum of lightheartedness, one of them is Rule 29. Always have your phone and wallet with you. I'll explain that one in a little bit, but some other rules have been learned through blood, sweat, and tears, like Rule 25. Always wear closed-toed shoes, which you can all see I'm successfully doing today. So with that, let's go back to that note to self, because that's where these rules come from. So this note to self idea, it works pretty well, but but people forget them all the time. If I were to ask all of you right now, think back the last 6 years, it's about how long I've been doing the rules. Think back and think of 5 of these note to selves you've told yourself. I wonder how many of you could think of 5 of them. But if you expand these out to a rule, you'll be likely to remember a lot more, like 55 of them. So with that, these note to selves, they're raw and they're complex. They're just an internal thing. That's really all they are. So how do we change that from that kind of ugly looking thing, if you were able to actually see it, to a cohesive, complex, external rule? Surprisingly, it's pretty easy. Sit down, spend time, and think about what happened. Typically, you'll learn this note to self after you tell yourself, that was really dumb. Or after, that was really cool, I should remember that. So that's how you create the rules. Now, I'm not saying for one note to self, you have to create one rule. When you break it down into manageable pieces, you might find 3 rules, maybe 5, maybe 10. So the phone and wallet example, Rule 29. How I got to that one day was I was out with some friends in high school, and I didn't have my wallet with me. And as we were all hanging out, I thought to myself, what happens if I got hurt? If the paramedics had to come? How would they know what my name is? How would they know who to contact? How would they know, because some wallets have those little allergy cards, how would they know if they can or cannot give me certain medications? They wouldn't. So I expanded that further. What happens if I don't have my phone and if I was in a car accident? How do I know the passerby isn't exactly that, just a passerby? So I created Rule 29. Now, once I created it, I had to write it down. Psychological studies show that if you write something down, you're more likely to remember it. So I had to write it down. But by writing it down, I don't mean that you have to remember it perfectly. You don't have to remember where every period and comma is. And even with that, you don't have to remember the specific number. If someone were to yell out right now and ask me, what is Rule 38? That is a phenomenal question. I cannot answer it. But if someone were to say, hey, Ben, figure it out, well, that's a rule. Or always wear closed-toed shoes, that's a rule. The importance of it is that if you're in a situation, you just have to remember the content of the rule. So when do the rules apply? Well, it depends. When you create your own list of rules, maybe you'll say, mine apply in situations X, Y, and Z, or A, B, and C. My own list of rules, they always apply because of a stipulation I put in there, and that is Rule 19. Sometimes you have to break a rule, which I know sounds very counterintuitive to this whole talk so far, but let me explain. I was doing something one day, and I came across a situation where a rule would effectively work. But I thought about it, and I told myself, if I were to utilize this rule right now, nothing would actually change. If I don't use it, I'll still get through perfectly fine. Everything will work out in the end. So I didn't use it. There was no need for it. So that's why my rules always apply. But when you create your own, you define when they apply. Now, the last thing I want to explain is why they work. And in order to do that, we have to go back to a philosopher named John Locke. Now, Locke had the view on knowledge of an empiricist. And an empiricist says that we gain our knowledge, our thoughts, and our learning capabilities from our senses and from our experiences. So he described it as tabula rasa, also known as the blank slate theory. Now, the blank slate works that when you are born, you have no prior built-in knowledge on the world or on life in general. So you take all of your experiences, everything that you do, and everything you can see, feel, touch, hear, and you put that onto a blank slate, almost like a blank piece of paper. And all of this piles up, and it creates who you are. It gives you your knowledge. It gives you the capability to learn. But the rules take this one step further. You take that big pile of information, and you break it down into those manageable pieces. By organizing it out, you're able to find your way through your thoughts and through your knowledge easier, more quickly. So you expand your knowledge, and by literally writing it down again, you gain the memory retention. And this blank slate goes throughout your entire life, from birth until death. So you'll always be using the blank slate. And if you use the rules, you'll always be able to have a more expanded knowledge. And the last thing I want to mention is Rule 40. When the job is done, walk away. Thank you.